The body was discovered at dawn, but the punishment had been prepared for 7 years. The rain had not stopped all night. It fell steadily over the lakeside villas of Hangzhou, blurring the boundary between water and sky, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they were made. Along the edge of West Lake, the gated estates of the wealthy stood like silent fortresses, built for privacy, distance, and forgetting. Villa number 88 remained dark. At 6:30 in the morning on November 11th, 2018, the housekeeper arrived as she always did. She entered through the service gate, careful not to make noise. Her employer, Zhao Wei, preferred to sleep late. He disliked being disturbed. The routine had been unchanged for years. That morning the house felt wrong. The air inside was colder than usual. Still, heavy. As she stepped into the main hall, a sharp metallic odor caught in her throat. It was not the smell of spoiled food or damp wood. It was something denser, sour, familiar to anyone who had ever stood too close to an accident. She followed the smell upstairs. The door to the master bedroom was partially open. Light from the gray morning filtered through the narrow gap. She hesitated. She was not permitted upstairs without instruction. But the odor intensified, thick enough to taste. She knocked. No response. When she pushed the door open, the scene erased all sense of protocol. Zhao Wei lay on the bed, naked, bound at the wrists and ankles to the four corners of the frame. Thick rope held him spread-eagle, exposing his body in a posture of absolute vulnerability. The white silk sheets beneath him were no longer white. They were soaked, stiff with dried blood that had turned dark brown and pooled onto the polished wooden floor. His eyes were open. They stared upward, glassy and fixed, as if the last thing he had seen was still suspended above him. His face was frozen in a distortion of terror that had not had time to fade. But the most disturbing injury was lower. Where his genitals should have been, there was only a mutilated cavity. Flesh torn away with precision. Blood loss so severe it had drained the body within minutes. The severed organ was gone. Removed. Taken. The housekeeper screamed. By 7:15, the Criminal Investigation Unit had sealed the perimeter. Yellow tape cut across the immaculate stone paths of the estate. Neighbors watched from behind tinted windows. Rain continued to fall, washing the grounds clean of anything that might have told a story. Captain Chen Jing arrived shortly after. He had seen violent deaths before. Gang stabbings, domestic killings, crimes driven by jealousy or desperation. But something about this scene resisted easy classification. The brutality was undeniable, yet the room was almost too orderly. No signs of struggle beyond the bed. No overturned furniture. No shattered objects. This was not chaos. This was control. The forensic examination confirmed what the scene already suggested. Zhao Wei, 42 years old, prominent real estate developer, had died between 2 and 4 in the morning. The fatal injury was not the restraints, not blunt force. It was hemorrhagic shock caused by the deliberate removal of the genitalia. He had been conscious. His pupils were dilated, facial muscles locked in extreme tension. There were no indicators of heavy sedation. Whatever had been used to restrain him had worn off just in time for him to feel everything. The murder weapon, the medical examiner noted, had been exceptionally sharp. The cut was clean, surgical. There was no hesitation in the wound. And the missing body part was not an oversight. It was a message. Security footage offered no comfort. The villa's camera system, among the most advanced in the district, had been disabled between 1 and 4 in the morning. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply turned off from the control source. Nothing was stolen. Watches, cash, and valuables remained untouched. Captain Chen stood at the foot of the bed and understood the truth before it was spoken aloud. This was not a robbery. This was not impulse. This was not rage. This was a sentence. And whoever carried it out had waited a very long time to deliver it. This was not murder. It was a punishment. The room told its story without speaking. Captain Chen Jing stood still at the foot of the bed, letting the details assemble themselves. The restraints were deliberate. Thick rope. Proper knots. Each limb secured to the bed frame at equal distance, forming a rigid cross. The victim had not been overpowered in a struggle. He had been positioned. The absence of disorder was the first contradiction. There were no overturned chairs, no shattered glass, no signs of frantic movement. The floor beyond the bloodstain was clean, wiped carefully along the edges. Whoever had done this understood containment. They knew where chaos was allowed and where it was not. Forensic photographer flashes punctuated the silence. The medical examiner, Liu Xiao, worked with practiced economy. He examined muscle rigidity, measured internal temperature, documented livor mortis. The findings converged quickly. Time of death fell between 2 and 4 in the morning. The body had not been moved afterward. Chen watched Liu's hands pause at the wound. The cut was precise. Too precise. This was not done with a kitchen knife, Liu said quietly. The blade was thin, extremely sharp, minimal tearing, clean margins. Chen asked the question already forming in his mind. Surgical, very likely, Liu replied. And the angle of entry suggests familiarity with anatomy. The person knew exactly where to cut. The absence of hesitation was more unsettling than the brutality itself. There were no defensive wounds on the victim's hands or arms. No broken nails. No abrasions from resistance. That detail alone narrowed the possibilities. Xiao Wei had not been awake when he was restrained. He had trusted whoever came close enough to bind him. Liu continued his examination of the eyes. Dilated pupils. Severe conjunctival hemorrhage. Facial muscles locked under extreme stress. He paused. He was conscious when the fatal injury occurred. Chen looked back at the bed. Conscious. Bound. Unable to move. The restraints had not been decorative. They were functional. Necessary. Crime scene technicians reported back one by one. No forced entry. No damage to doors or windows. The biometric lock at the main entrance showed no tampering. Someone had entered with authorization or had been allowed inside. The security system presented a larger problem. Between 1 and 4 in the morning, every camera had gone dark simultaneously. Not smashed. Not disabled at random. Powered down through the central control. That required access. Knowledge. Preparation. This was not a crime committed by someone improvising. Chen stepped away from the bed and surveyed the rest of the room. The bedside table held a glass with residue at the bottom. A faint herbal scent lingered in the air, nearly overwhelmed by the smell of dried blood. He made a note of it. Subtle details often survived where obvious ones failed. There was no sign of theft. A luxury watch lay untouched. Cash remained in the drawer. Even the victim's phone rested on the nightstand, face down, undamaged. The only thing missing was the severed body part. It had been taken intentionally. Chen understood what that meant. In his experience, removal of a body part was rarely practical. It served no functional purpose in murder. When it occurred, it carried symbolism, rage, obsession, punishment. This was not about killing Zhao Wei. This was about diminishing him. The victim profile complicated matters further. Zhao Wei was not an anonymous man. He was wealthy, connected, accustomed to control. His personal life, though discreetly managed, was widely rumored to be chaotic. Affairs, exploitative relationships, quiet settlements. People like him accumulated enemies without noticing. But very few enemies waited. The housekeeper's statement added another layer. She confirmed that Zhao Wei had received private medical treatment at home. Regular sessions. Always at night. Always alone. The therapist was described as unremarkable. Professional. Quiet. Someone Zhao trusted. Chen made another note. Trust was now the central theme. As the body was prepared for removal, Chen stood by the door and watched the scene one last time. The room no longer resembled a crime scene to him. It resembled a stage after a performance. Everything placed where it needed to be. Nothing left behind by accident. The killer had not fled in panic. They had completed a task. Outside, rain continued to fall, washing the villa grounds clean. But Chen knew this case would not be solved by what the rain erased. It would be solved by what the killer had preserved. Because whoever did this had not acted in the moment. They had been waiting. Only someone trusted could have done this. The message arrived without explanation. It was sent at 8:30 in the evening on November 10th, 2018, just hours before Zhao Wei was bound to his bed. The phone number was unregistered, activated minutes before transmission, deactivated immediately after. The text contained 6 words. The debt from 7 years ago is due. For Captain Chen Jing, the phrasing mattered. It was not emotional, not impulsive. It was contractual, as if time itself had been an agreement waiting to be enforced. Investigators traced the signal to a radius near the villa by West Lake, but the sender was already gone. The question shifted from who sent the message to why the number 7 had been chosen. The answer lay in the past. 7 years earlier, in 2011, Zhao Wei was not yet a celebrated developer in Hangzhou. His business operations were based primarily in Shenzhen, where rapid growth created opportunities and anonymity in equal measure. During that period, a civil complaint was filed at a district police station in Nanshan. The complainant was a university student named Wang Jia. She was in her final year. According to the archived statement, Zhao Wei had pursued her persistently. He promised marriage, stability, a future that extended beyond graduation. When she became pregnant, those promises dissolved. At 6 months, Zhao Wei revealed that he was already married. The complaint detailed confinement, threats, physical force. Wang Jia alleged that Zhao Wei detained her in an apartment for several days, withheld food, and coerced her into terminating the pregnancy at an unlicensed clinic. The procedure was described as rushed and poorly managed. The complaint was withdrawn 2 weeks later. The file contained a single line explaining the closure. Civil settlement reached. No criminal charges followed. When investigators contacted a retired officer who had handled the case, he remembered it clearly. Not because it was unusual, but because it ended the way many did. Money changed hands. Pressure was applied. Silence followed. Wang Jia disappeared from the university shortly afterward. Records showed no graduation, no employment, no subsequent residence under her name. Her digital footprint ended in late 2011, as if someone had closed a door and erased the hallway behind it. The investigative team widened the search. In a crowded rental district of Bao'an, former neighbors recalled a young woman who kept to herself. Pale, withdrawn, frequently ill. The landlady remembered seeing her sew infant clothing late at night, then cut the garments apart in tears. No one asked questions. In places like that, survival depended on not knowing too much. In December of that year, a fire broke out in the room she rented. The cause was listed as a gas stove malfunction. The fire was contained, but Wang Jia suffered severe burns to her face and arms. She was hospitalized briefly, then discharged. After that, she vanished again. Investigators followed the trail to her hometown in Guizhou province. There, the story took on another layer of erasure. Her parents had disowned her. Letters she sent were destroyed unopened. Villagers said the family erected an ancestral tablet, treating her as if she were already dead. No photographs beyond her student ID remained. Back in Hangzhou, Captain Chen reviewed the timeline. Pregnancy, forced abortion, disappearance, fire, facial disfigurement, family rejection, 7 years of silence. The pattern suggested not survival, but reconstruction. When forensic analysts compared Wang Jia's old student records with the identity documents of a licensed physical therapist named Li Jing, inconsistencies emerged. Height matched. Bone structure aligned. A rare anatomical feature of the earlobe appeared in both profiles. A biometric specialist concluded there was an 85% structural match. Li Jing, 35 years old, certified in physical therapy and traditional medicine, had been treating Zhao Wei for chronic back pain for nearly 2 years. She had access. She had knowledge. She had time. Chen understood the implication before the confirmation arrived from Yunnan authorities. The real Li Jing had died years earlier. Her identity had been appropriated, purchased, repurposed. Wang Jia had not disappeared. She had been preparing. 7 years was not an accident of time. It was an incubation period, long enough to learn, to alter her appearance, to acquire skills that would one day turn intimacy into access and access into punishment. When Chen placed the photographs side by side, the difference was striking. The girl in the student ID smiled gently. The therapist's face was lean, expressionless, almost anonymous. The transformation was complete. She did not vanish. She rebuilt herself. By the time Zhao Wei met Li Jing, he believed the past was behind him. His business had stabilized. His reputation had been polished. The scandals that once followed him had faded into private settlements and forgotten files. Pain remained, however. Chronic, persistent, the kind that resisted money. That was how Li Jing entered his life. She did not arrive with charm or flirtation. She arrived quietly. Her clothing was plain. Her voice restrained. She wore a medical mask even when not required, explaining it away as an allergy. There was nothing about her that invited attention. That was precisely why Zhao Wei trusted her. She was hired to treat his back pain. 3 sessions a week. Always in the evening. Always in the privacy of the villa by West Lake. No assistants. No observers. Only patient and healer. Her technique was effective. Within weeks, Zhao Wei reported improvement. His sleep deepened. His irritability softened. He canceled meetings less often. The housekeeper noted that he complained less. He smiled more. Relief bred dependence. Li Jing asked few questions. She listened. She did not comment on his personal life. She did not react when he spoke casually about women or past relationships. She behaved as professionals were expected to behave. Invisible. Reliable. Harmless. What Zhao Wei did not realize was that his treatment extended beyond his spine. Over time, subtle changes appeared. Nightmares. Disrupted sleep. Episodes of anxiety he could not explain. He described dreams of running down endless corridors, of being chased, of hearing an infant cry just beyond reach. When he mentioned them, Li Jing nodded sympathetically and adjusted his regimen. She introduced herbal preparations, calming teas, aromatic oils said to promote relaxation. The scents were unfamiliar but pleasant. Earthy, grounding. Zhao Wei did not question them. Forensic analysis later identified traces of local anesthetics and sedative compounds on the bedding. Substances consistent with professional use. Not enough to render someone unconscious immediately. Enough to weaken resistance. Enough to blur judgment. Li Jing understood dosage. She also understood patience. 2 years passed. During that time, Zhao Wei never suspected her. To him, she was background. A service provider. A function. She blended into the environment of the villa as seamlessly as the furniture. When she requested adjustments to her schedule, he approved them without hesitation. When she asked for access to different rooms for therapeutic reasons, he granted it. When she asked to work later at night, citing better muscle relaxation, he agreed. Trust became routine. Routine became vulnerability. On the night of November 10th, Zhao Wei canceled a social engagement, citing fatigue. He drank the herbal mixture Li Jing had prepared. He lay down earlier than usual. The pain medication he had been prescribed, combined with the sedative effects of the treatment, dulled his awareness. Li Jing remained. She waited until his breathing slowed, until the body she had studied for 2 years was motionless beneath her hands. Then she moved with efficiency. Rope placed. Knots tightened. Position secured. When Zhao Wei woke, it was already too late. The forensic findings were clear. He had regained consciousness. His eyes had focused. His muscles had tensed against restraints that did not give. The anesthetic had worn off just enough. Li Jing did not rush. The blade she used was thin, surgical, clean. She applied it with precision learned through years of practice. The cut was not wild. It was deliberate, controlled, designed to sever arteries quickly while preserving awareness. Pain was not incidental. It was intended. Afterward, she cleaned the room. She wiped surfaces. She powered down the camera system using access she had acquired over months of observation. She collected the object she had come to retrieve. The punishment was complete. When investigators later searched Li Jing's residence, they found evidence not of chaos, but of ritual. Herbal compounds, medical instruments, personal effects arranged with care. There were no trophies on display. No written confessions. Only preparation. Captain Chen understood then that the murder had not been the climax of the story. It had been the conclusion of a long, internal trial that Zhao Wei had never known he was standing in. Li Jing had not acted in anger. She had acted after judgment. He believed she was healing him. In reality, she was deciding when the sentence would be carried out. The arrest did not feel triumphant. Li Jing was taken into custody without resistance. She complied with instructions. She answered questions when asked, and remained silent when she chose not to. There were no emotional outbursts, no declarations of innocence, no visible relief. In the interrogation room, she appeared exactly as she had during treatment sessions. calm, measured, unremarkable. When confronted with the evidence, she did not deny her identity. The documents, the forensic correlations, the appropriated name, the timeline of preparation. She acknowledged each element with a slight nod, as if confirming steps in a process long completed. The severed body part was never recovered. Investigators believed it had been disposed of intentionally, not hidden. There was no attempt to preserve it as a trophy. No shrine. No ritual display. That absence mattered. It suggested closure. At trial, the prosecution laid out the facts with precision. Years of preparation. False identity. Premeditation. Medical knowledge applied to restrain, sedate, and mutilate. The defense presented the earlier complaint from 2011. The forced abortion. The confinement. The threats. The fire. The erasure of a life. The court listened. Witnesses spoke of Jia Wei's reputation, of his money, of his influence, of how easily the system had bent around him. Others testified to Li Jing's discipline, her education, her quiet competence, her lack of prior criminal history. No one contested the killing. The question before the court was not whether it had happened. It was how to interpret 7 years of waiting. The verdict arrived after deliberation measured in hours, not days. Guilty. The sentence was severe. The law acknowledged the past harm but did not excuse the outcome. The court ruled that suffering did not grant authority to punish. Justice, it concluded, could not be privatized. Li Jing accepted the sentence without visible reaction. When offered the opportunity to speak, she declined. She did not describe her pain. She did not explain her reasoning. She did not ask for understanding. The silence was complete. Outside the courthouse, public reaction fractured along familiar lines. Some called the punishment barbaric. Others called it inevitable. Many asked the same question in different forms. Why did the system fail the first time? 7 years earlier, a complaint had been filed. Evidence had existed. Intervention had been possible. Instead, the process had closed quietly, leaving one person to absorb the consequences alone. Captain Chen watched the proceedings from the back of the courtroom. He understood that the case would be remembered for its brutality, for the method, for the symbolism. But he also understood something less visible. The violence did not begin on the night of the murder. It began when harm was documented and dismissed, when accountability was deferred, when silence was purchased and accepted as resolution. The law had spoken now, clearly, publicly. Too late to prevent what followed. As the case file was archived, Chen added a final note for the record. It was not a legal observation. It was a personal one. Crimes like this do not ask whether punishment is justified. They ask how long neglect is allowed to grow. The answer in this case was 7 years. And by the time justice arrived, it came carrying a knife. Justice delayed does not disappear. It transforms.